here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned. Immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's the turn of the musician and writer Anthony Reynolds, who I spoke to very recently about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in various bands including Jacques, who released 3 full-length albums, including Pioneer Soundtracks. That was released in 1996, exactly 30 years ago, and also went on to other musical projects and has written lots of books, including a very good one on Japan. But you'll find out more about his musical life and various other bits and pieces in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Anthony, it's over to you.
Well, I will jump on Space Oddity because I have a very vivid memory, which I haven't been able to validate by YouTube. I remember the re-release of Space Oddity, which I think was 1972. You know, after Bowie had broken through, and they just had NASA footage on Top of the Pops, I'm sure. So that was a huge. I remember watching that, and the Laughing Gnome.
Right.
I think they re-released that too in about. Oh, then again, I would have been 1 in 1972, so perhaps a bit later. But this is all specific, these memories, to a house we lived in. So I remember David Bowie being a presence in this house, which I moved from when I was 5. So Bowie, yeah. And the crazy thing about Space, so you bought Space Oddity.
So I got the reissue, when it got released again. I think that was either 74 or 75, and that's the one that had this double B-side of Changes and Velvet Goldmine. I thought, wow, that's really...
I'm talking about then, yeah. Because Velvet Goldmine, that was a nod to Velvet Underground, I guess.
Yes, that's right. And then there was a film that was made about 20 years ago, which they took that name from.
I like that film, man. So there was that, but I didn't buy those singles. I didn't buy any singles because I was 5 years old and I didn't have any royalties at that point. But I remember my mum is a huge music fan. And I said, okay, so my first single, I remember David Bowie, but the first single I nagged my mum was Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell.
Excellent.
Because that was on Top of the Pops too. And there was a kind of promo video of him on a horse. So that was the first one. But, you know, it was an interesting era that I grew up in. So I was born in 1971. And there are a lot of singles that I heard a lot of the time then, which I've subsequently found out were old even then. So I'm talking about Grocer Jack. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember Grocer Jack.
Grocer Jack, back. Was it Snap the Magic Dragon?
There could have been that one, but there was also some very, very weird ones because you had things like Ernie, he drove the fastest milk cart, and then you had also people like Telly Savalas would do a song, and then there was other ones, you know, that came out.
Savalas, he couldn't even speak in tune, could he? Great haircut, but what I'm saying is, I remember all these songs like Nelly the Elephant and Big John. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember Big John.
Oh, big. So I would have been 5. It would have been 1976, and these songs were really old then. They were 10 years old. I don't know what radio station, but radio was a huge thing then, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, because it was almost like a religious experience on a Sunday evening, listening to the top 40 countdown, and songs would only travel very slowly from sort of, oh, it's ain't at 38, and then next week, oh, it's at number 33, and it would have this like slow progression. It might get on Top of the Pops, so you'd have to watch Top of the Pops to see if it's on, and you didn't have a chance to listen to it again, so you had to sort of listen to this kind of moment quite carefully, really, and just pray that your song was kind of going in the right direction.
And you would I'd record them, and you'd try and wait until the DJ had stopped talking.
Yes.
So, you know, it's straight in, number 48, well, they were stopped 40, number 38. It's hot chocolate with a, right, he's good. And then he'd always, you know, they'd always say something extra. But it was huge.
I said they used to love talking over the beginning and end of songs, and it was quite infuriating. But yeah, trying to record these things sometimes was the only way you're going to be able to hear it again. So it was important.
I mean, there was Top of the Pops, which was, you know, everyone sat down to watch. But God, I know this sounds like a huge cliche. But, I come from a working class family, and money wasn't abundant. So when there was records I wanted, you'd have to rely on your auntie to get you a record token.
Yes.
You couldn't just splash out an album. Forget about it. You know, if you had a record token for £5, you could get maybe 4 or 5 singles. And as you said, the B-sides were a bonus.
The B-sides, they were important, really, the B-sides. Well, it was interesting because, you know, again, from that working class family, my parents, when they got married in 1957, I mean, they sold all their possessions. They were one of those people who, you know, couples who never had any debt. So they sold everything. And then a record player appeared in the early 70s, you know, and then a couple of records, which were pretty awful, really. Like the Great War themes, or the Top of the Poppers sing the Carpenters, which I loved intensely. But, you know, there wasn't a choice, you know. So I played this album thinking it was the Carpenters for years, and then realised actually it wasn't. But I still loved the songs.
Well,
so
you would really make the most of it. And I mean, I was lucky because my mum had brilliant musical taste, still does. So she had all the Walker Brothers, Beatles, Scott Walker, Motown. But in a way, when you're a kid, you don't want to listen to your mum's record collection. I didn't, you know. But I'll tell you, David, something interesting happened to me a couple of weekends ago. I've been quite ill, and I was in bed on a Saturday, and there was a power cut, right? Now, we don't get power cuts very often. I mean, we used to. Back in the good old days, you know, 3-day week. And there was a power cut. So nothing worked in this place. And I thought, I will listen to some music. And it's like, the only way I would have been able to listen to music is by picking up a guitar and playing some. And it made me realize, you know, I mean, recorded sound is what? 120 years old? I think this is, you know, rock and roll is what, 70 years old, maybe 80 years old.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it made me realize how different the quality assigned to music would have been. You know, if people would, because some people are desperate to hear music. You know, it's kind of food. And when I had this power cut, I thought, imagine it was like this all the time. You know, this is why my grandmother had a piano.
Yeah. And I guess that's where the church was so important, and those composers and yeah, such people. But to hear that, you'd have to sort of properly look forward to it and go out and experience it live. There was no sort of listening to it on your headphones, was there?
Well, this is something I realized about 7 inches, about 25 years ago. Um, I, like everyone else, when CDs became omnipresent, I kind of gave up on vinyl, like an idiot, like every other. And then I remember I was living in East London, and I found a whole bunch of 7 inches in this junk shop, and so I bought them, and I got like like a little gramophone. What do they call those little radiogram kind of thing?
Yeah.
Little. What's the name for them anyway? And I put it on in the flat, the 7 inch, and I realized that one of the things about 7 inches were, unlike CDs and unlike vinyl, one of the things about vinyl, as opposed to CDs, and especially opposed to streaming, when you put that record on, you couldn't go anywhere. If you wanted to listen to Space Oddity, you put the 7 inch on and you listened. You put a CD on, and my instinct is to leave the room because it's playing. And now it's just a sea of sound in every room. So what I realized about 7 inches and vinyl was they demand a commitment of listening. If you've, oh God, I sound like such an old fogey. If you've worked down the mine or done a paper round, or did a paper round, just to buy, in my day, would have been like a Duran Duran album.
Mm-hmm.
You have to play that vinyl on your little record player, and you've saved up for maybe 2 weeks. You're going to give that your full attention, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. I mean, there were records I remember buying because it was voted or it was regarded as the album or the single of the week, and you just had to take a punt. But you thought, yeah, that's the single. It's going to change my life. And you put the style, and you went, oh my God, this is terrible. But it's been quite an investment of time and money. I'm going to play it until I get something from this record. But I can't admit that I hate it.
And then, flip it over. Maybe the B-sides give you something. You mentioned the cassette, the C86. Well, they used to give out flexies as well, didn't they?
Oh, they did, and 7-inch singles, but flexies, yeah, definitely.
But also really like bad quality 7-inch singles with about I think 2 tracks on each side. And that was a gift. So I was introduced to the Velvet Underground by one of these freebie, terrible, I think they played at 33 RPM, maybe.
Yep. So there was 4 tracks, 2 on each side, and they did play at that speed because there was there was a Husker Du. Husker Du appeared on one of them doing 8 Miles High, which I seem to remember.
I love that song, yeah. But my introduction to the Velvet Underground was one of those 7-inches given away with sounds, because Velvet Underground were releasing an album called BU, which was like outtakes they just discovered, and it was Stephanie Says, and that blew my mind. And I recently put up on Facebook, does anyone remember, because I couldn't remember which magazine it was from, and my friend Paul Fenneran, who's a wizard, said, it was from Sounds, like September 1986. And that was a huge, I mean, the other 3 tracks I can't remember, but the other thing is this, because we only had, I think, 4 channels in the 80s.
Yes, Channel 4 crept in during the early 80s.
82, Channel 4. So I listened to this amazing song called Stephanie Says, which had a viola in it. And it was kind of acoustic. And the lyrics were odd, everybody calls her Alaska. What the hell does that mean? right? But it was something so seductive about the sound. And I thought, I don't know who these people are, but what year is it from? I don't even know. And then, like, 2 days later, there was a South Bank special on the Velvet Underground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was so limited what you had access to, but then consequently so powerful. So it was like, boom, Stephanie Says. What is this? You know, there's no internet. There's nothing in, you know, there's a little bit in sounds, who they were. Do I go to the library and find, like, a book of rock and roll? And then you had Melvin Bragg, who popped up on Sunday night, and it was a whole show. It was like, who the hell's Andy Warhol?
Yes, that's true.
Next week, it's the South Bank show on Andy Warhol. And John Cale, well, he's from Wales, where you're from. It's like, what? No one cool comes from Wales? Are you nuts?
Yes.
So it was beautiful then. Whereas now, there's less, that kind of thing happens less accidentally. You know what I mean?
Yes.
People choose their immediate culture now on catch up, streaming. I mean, there were times in my life, like when I moved to London, I didn't have a television. And I remember when I moved to London, the Buddha of Suburbia was coming out on TV. And I'd read about it, and I knew David Bowie was involved. So I remember this girl chatting me up in a club. And I didn't really fancy her. She was very pleasant. But I kind of went along with it because I could then say, can I come around your house on Tuesday to watch the Buddha of Suburbia? You know what I mean?
Yes, this is true. I know it's kind of strange, isn't it? Really, that world of straight, slightly sort of creative poverty, really, wasn't it? Especially the 80s. I remember. I think that's why there were so many indie bands during that time, because there was a lot of unemployment, and there was access to unemployment benefit and job seekers allowance and enterprise allowance schemes were quite easy at that stage. So people did assume that most people would be unemployed unless you were buying the Thatcher dream, really. The 80s was quite an interesting decade in that way.
Well, I was alive. I was a teenager in the 80s. And let's see. So, 1990, I was 19.
So when you got to 16, did you leave school at that stage, or did you do your A levels?
Well, could you just pause here for a second?
Oh, right, yes, I'll do. I will just. Wait a minute. I'll hit. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. So just briefly then, during the 80s, obviously you were born 1971, ish. Then so yeah, when you got to 16, did you leave school at that stage, or were you in Cardiff as well by that point?
I left home at 15.
Right, you hit the road.
Yeah, and it was just before my 16th birthday. So I left. I pretty much stopped going to school around then. I always really vehemently hated school. There was, some of the social aspects were okay. But, I mean, I got one O level.
Right.
Which was in grade A, amazingly, in English. But I had no interest in academia. I mean, I did go to an all-boys Catholic school taught by brothers.
Right.
Who, I mean, you probably remember this, who thrashed you on a daily basis. You know, corporal punishment was, not only was illegal, it seemed to be compulsory.
Yes, I know. It was a bit brutal in those days. Yes.
Oh, I found out why. I did a few months of teacher training years ago, right? I thought I'll try and be normal. And I was, yeah. And I was told, under no circumstances can you touch your pupils. Because, like, I remember, I think one kid, I mean, they were all very downtrodden, these children. Latchkey kids, really.
Yeah.
And one of them did surprise me. I was trying to teach music. And he was good. And I just wanted to tap him on the shoulder and say, oh, that was a good job. I said, absolutely no way can you touch children.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pat them on the head, nothing. And I said to the teacher, I said, that's so interesting, because when I was at school, you were routinely thrashed with plimsolls, board dusters.
Yes, board rubbers were coming at you left, right, and centre, weren't they?
And it would be a cloud of chalk dust, wouldn't it? As
yes.
Ricocheted off that head. There was the cane, there was the leather strap. Anyway, I said, so, I mean, what happened? He said, you were taught by people who had got into teaching after the Second World War. So after the Second World War, in the 40s, late 40s, there was a shortage of teachers. And if you were ex-military, you didn't need to do any tests or anything. You could just become a teacher. And obviously, a lot of these guys had PTSD. You know what I mean?
Yes, because we had two teachers who had been in the Navy. I think it was the Navy they were both in, and they weren't really teachers, but they had this great, discipline. It was all about discipline, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, at the expense of anything else, yeah. So I wasn't a big school guy, no.
No.
So but it was great. I mean, music, I was obsessed with music. So I moved into a bedsit with an incredible... I moved into this house, this beautiful, like 3-4-story Victorian house. And the landlady was a Russian... I think she'd fled the pogroms, She was Jewish.
Yes.
And I was so young. It's crazy to think how young I was. 16. And in this house, it was all old people. It seemed to me they were old. But I remember Mrs. Bear on the top floor showing me photos. She'd been in the Bolshoi in like Moscow in like 1920s.
Nice.
So it was very rich. And I was able... what did I live off? I was too young to sign on, so I was given a pension book. Can you believe it?
Yeah, no, I did not see that one coming at all.
I was given a pension book until I was old enough to sign on. And I would go to the post office every Monday morning with all the old dears queuing up to get I think I got £30 a week, which was a fortune.
Yeah.
And, I was in a band with friends, and I was a drummer. So I was able to buy a drum kit and set it up in my bedsit. And I remember I had to put blankets over it, and I would drum along to Oil on Canvas by Japan, and Smiths and Viva Hate.
Well, Adamant?
No, Morrissey's.
Oh, Viva Hate, his first solo album.
So that's how I learned to play the drums. And it was, and I had my first girlfriend. Yeah, that's all I wanted to do,
God, that's fantastic. So, yeah, and was this all in Cardiff, by the way?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, interestingly enough, when I was a kid, my father, in like 78, was made redundant. And so he got a payoff, and we suddenly went on these insane holidays. So we'd been going to like Tenby, right, which is the equivalent of Blackpool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Every year we go to Tenby, stay in a B&B, me and my brother are in bunk beds. And then my dad got this money, and we were in, the next holiday, we were in Romania during the Cold War.
Blimey, quite a jump.
It was a bit of a jump, yeah. So, and then the next year we went to Italy, we went to Germany, France. So I had travelled, but, well, I moved to London when I was, I think, 20.
Right.
But,
and how were you finding the music scene? Because obviously at that age, you must have, I say must have, putting words in your mouth, but, obsessive about music. The indie pop scene was happening, like you mentioned, the Smiths there. But there was also all that other scene. But then, 78, 87, the Smiths break up, and then, there's a bit of a new scene. Ecstasy comes along, and people want to dance and get jolly, don't they? And then there's grunge coming along from Seattle, and another scene, and there's shoegazing as well from North London. So what was your sort of feeling at that time, being sort of in your late teens?
Well, okay, so first off, this is really odd as well, but I was in a group, so I was with a bass player, a singer, a guitarist. We all had girlfriends. So that was my social group. And I was a drummer to begin with. And I don't know why this is, but we had no interest in alcohol or drugs. It didn't. I don't think I bought a bottle of wine to drink at home until I was living in London in my 20s. And then we can say I took to it like a duck to water, but we were very pure. We were just totally focused on music. But what you're talking about, I wouldn't say I flew in the face of fashion, but I always liked what I liked. So in the late 80s, early 90s, Manchester came along, right?
Yes, very much.
Now I didn't take ease. I had no interest in that. And I would go to clubs because I loved to dance. And so we danced to the Charlatans, Happy Mondays. And I could really appreciate, especially Shaun Ryder as a lyricist. And it was groovy, and you'd be like, but I was listening to Kate Bush and David Sylvian.
Yes.
I wasn't really buying the record. Pulp were probably the first. So I was outside it, but at the time in it, And do you remember there was a program called 120 Minutes on MTV?
No, because I didn't watch MTV, I'm afraid.
Okay, because my parents had Sky. So then I was aware of shoegaze and stuff through that, because I never really listened to John Peel either.
Right, yes, because he was the go-to man for the 80s for me. He introduced me to all sorts of stuff, from the Bundy Boys to Napalm Death.
I was Steve Wright guy.
Oh my God.
I know.
Steve Wright in the afternoon. Yeah. It was daytime radio. Even now, Simon Bates with his misery moment of kind of some couple getting married who had a lovely relationship, and then she went to the doctors and she had 2 months to live. And our song, or our tune, wasn't it? Oh my God.
She gave birth to a 3-headed, ironing board, or whatever. And they took that ironing board and raised it as their own. Today, the ironing board. No, okay. So I was unemployed, gleefully so, as I told you. And I would just write songs all day. I learned guitar, practiced the drums. I had a piano. And then listening to Steve Wright in the afternoon as an unemployed 17-year-old was great. He played Momus. He played David Sylvian. He could be a bit, what's the word, ultra now and then. I think John Peel scared me. It was a bit too freaky for me.
Right, yeah, well, it's all good. I think he just, well, he also, there was a few bands, he did hate the Smiths. When they brought out Hang the DJ, he took that as a personal affront, didn't he? And then Elvis Costello did that song Radio Radio, didn't he, about they think they were out of control. And they would just beam. When you see Top of the Pops with those people beaming at you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, Simon, I was watching, they're on every Friday, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think Simon Baker introduced Japan. And you look at the 1981, so I'm talking about their first Top of the Pops appearance, Quiet Life. So I know that Simon Baker said, and a new group tonight, and I know that David Sylvian made him change that because they weren't a new group. But you look at Simon Bates with his Teflon left parting, and it cuts to Japan. They're almost not the same species. You've got this button-down guy, and then these voraciously beautiful human beings. So it was at odds, wasn't it?
Well, they all looked ancient, didn't they? And deluded, because obviously when they said, "Look, you are getting a bit old, Grandad. Perhaps you need to move on," they were so upset. And it's like, but you don't get it. You're not
hairy cold.
Oh, the hairy cold. I mean, they just looked like really old chaps. And then you had people like Ralph Harris and Jimmy Savile and all those guys as well. Sort of. I mean, they were just all such a bizarre bunch. Anyway, before the DBS checks became part of our lives.
Have you seen, there's a great documentary on YouTube called When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth? And it's about the sacking of all these guys. When Matthew Bannister came in.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen various bits of that. I'm thinking, God, he was really on the money, wasn't he?
But they were so pompous, these DJs. See, I think it was David E. Travis. He gave this speech to, announcing his retirement. And the guy thought he was Winston Churchill. It is with some regret, much heart searching, that I must today say I'm not happy. It's like, mate, you're just opening faiths.
Yes, well, it was strange that they didn't say, "Yeah, fair cop. We've got away with it, and frankly, we have no idea about modern music anymore, and we shouldn't be doing it, and we should just go to Radio 2, and that'll be fine." But they did sort of dig in quite a lot, didn't they? Anyway, that was that, really. So then, did you say you were in London at this stage in the sort of the early 90s, in Bedsit land?
Yes, I moved to London in 93.
Right.
And that was amazing.
And did you sort of have that, right, I'm going to London now and I'm going to form a band, and wow, Britpop's about to appear. How lucky is that?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I was already in a group called Jacques. We'd formed in 92 in Cardiff. Now, what you must realise about Jacques, and even me today, even though I'm Welsh, I suppose, and I never felt particularly well, Wales has never taken to anything I do, musically, literature-wise, nothing. So Jacques would play 3 times a week in Cardiff, maybe Newport, and we never had a following, nothing. And we also were totally unaware of groups like Gorky's Psychotic Monkey, Super Furry Animals, Capitonia, 60-Foot Dolls. We always ended up doing shows with a jam tribute group, or
Had you, before that, in the 80s, had you been aware of bands like Daft Bluggy, who were the Welsh? Because John Peel in about 86, 87 really played a lot of Welsh bands at that point.
I since got to know those groups because my last partner, she was actually Max Boyce. Well, she still is Max Boyce's daughter. So she was what I consider very Welsh. And she would play me some of this stuff, and I thought this is pretty good. There was one group, sounds like a Welsh Four. I've got a very funny Marky Smith story, actually. But although I grew up in Wales, no one I knew spoke Welsh. Welsh was not a thing in the part of Wales I grew up in. In fact, there was some kind of misdemeanor with the TV, the aerial. So we would get Bristol television.
Right.
So at the age of like 15, I was an expert on the Bristol and Bath art scene. There was this presenter with curly hair. He was great. So I knew all about that, but nothing about anything else. In fact, in my house, because my mother was a huge Bowie and Scott Walker fan, and she leaned towards Europe. If anything Welsh came on TV, it'd be turning that rubbish off.
Right.
You know? So it was only when I moved to London that I remember, because obviously I don't have an accent, do I?
No.
No. You know, I pretty much sound like, Dirk Bogarde. You know,
Oliver Reed, really.
Yeah, or I've got received pronunciation. Oh, Sammy David. But when I moved to London, I remember I was really tired, and I was at the bar, and I was kind of falling asleep, and this skinhead opposite me slapped my hand away and said, "Don't you dare fall asleep. You're bringing my buzz down." I said, "Well, you know what? What the hell are you talking about?" And he went, "You're a tough cunt." And that was really the first time I realised that I was Welsh.
Right, my God. And was that a good or bad thing when he said that? Was that like, okay, I won't mess with you, or now I'm going to beat you up?
I think he fancied me. Because I did then look very alluring when I closed my eyes.
Right.
And I remember clocking him, and he had eyeliner on.
Oh, right.
Well, it was a good look.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, this is the the John Major years, really, aren't they? So you relocated '93 to London, about to launch into the world of Britpop and beautiful orchestral pop, really, weren't you? So did you take the band with you, or did you have to sort of scrap that? And
this was very interesting. What I did, because I had no qualifications, I didn't want to just turn up to London with no money. I think I was working as in Cardiff. I was working as travel editor for a local listings magazine, which paid nothing. But I was living with a girl. She worked at Boots, and we had a lovely flat, nice flat. I had a comfortable life, and I knew I was going to either get married and forget about music, or I had to go for it. But at the same time, I didn't want to just turn up to London and like live in a bed sit in Earl's Court. So I did something called an access course.
Oh yes, a 1-year access course. You got a grant, didn't you?
You got something, I can't remember now, but I was able to get into a university, and I knew that would give me some money and a context.
Yeah.
For living in London. So I did that, and I moved I got into Middlesex University. I think I went to 2 lectures the whole time I was there. But it got me into a house with 4 women, which was great.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend's parents lent me some money to like set myself up, and I paid them back when I got I think it was the first year of student loans.
Right, yeah. I think you got about £800, £900
Yeah.
a term or something. I can't, yeah.
Grand, but they lent me. And the rest of the group didn't want to come. And then, amazingly, Matthew Scott, the guy I wrote songs with in Jacques, somehow, it wasn't planned, I was prepared to do it on my own, he got into Middlesex University, and he moved down the road. Now, Jacques is not me. I couldn't do a show now in London or whatever, or Paris, and call it Jacques. Jacques was me and this guitarist, Matthew Scott, that I co-wrote the songs with.
Mm-hmm.
So with him coming up, I put the obligatory advert in Melody Maker and I think Q. And then we recruited the band and we were signed in a year.
Blimey. So had you made demo tapes at this point and had started writing songs?
Oh, no, yeah. But I mean, as I said, we'd been playing in Cardiff and we demoed some songs in Cardiff to absolutely no interest. And we did demo a couple of songs in Wimbledon, I remember. Now, we were all students, so we had to take, amphetamine. So drugs were starting to creep in now, and drink as well, as opposed to the purest years. So we have to take amphetamine and book a studio from midnight.
Right.
Like so many other people have done. And record all night when it was half price, And we did that, and we did a lot of gigs. And then we did this gig in early 95 at the Dublin Castle.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah. And it was just, it was just an amazing gig. I don't know why. And after that, the phone started ringing. I don't even know how they got my number. And word of mouth, I guess.
Also, was there a bit of obviously that London scene was, and a lot of other scenes were sort of getting very excitable at that stage, because obviously what was coming next was the great kind of Britpop moment with all the bands like My Life Story, which we loved so much, but Elastica, Sleeper, Echo Belly, and all the usual kind of obvious ones. But there was definitely a sort of an optimistic vibe. We'd gone from Red Wedge and Rock Against Racism to sort of let's get some strings, let's make something a bit more poetic, wasn't it?
Well, totally. There was a zeitgeist happening. And I remember it was so amazing to be in London, when you're 21. And now, see, with the girl I'd lived with in Cardiff, we became obsessed with Pulp before they became. So we would travel up to see Pulp when no one was in the audience, And I just thought, this is what I love London. I remember the DJs would play really, cool music as opposed to Cardiff. So I remember My Life Story, because I kind of went off them because I didn't get on with the singing. But I remember seeing them at the Water Rats when I just moved to London. And I had never seen Do you know the Water Rats? It's quite a small venue.
I'm not sure if it's. I can't. We went to see them quite a lot of times in London, but I can't remember. There was Ronnie Scott's. There was a Month of Sundays at Camden. Perhaps I don't know. I can't remember.
Did you see them at the Jazz Cafe?
Well, Ronnie Scott's. They were there.
Well, I remember I went to a gig they did at the Jazz Cafe in Camden, and it was like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
No, this was in the evening, but no, it was. I just, I loved that first album. Then the second one was also good.
Mornington Crescent, yeah. And I remember it was like it blew me away. They had a string section, and there was
a lot of members. They put on a very good show.
Yeah, there were more people in the band than there were in the audience.
Yes, I know. I know. The annoying thing was they always played very short sets. You'd make the effort to go and see them, and they would finish after about 50 minutes.
And our old friend Steve Wright played their first single.
Did he? Oh my God, Steve! He had his finger on the pulse. He was there, wasn't he?
I'm telling you,
I'll have to rethink my opinion of Steve. Yeah. So you're in London in the mid 90s at this point. The band,
93, 94.
Yes, you and Matthew have got a plan. You are the sort of, was it a bit like the Jagger, Richards, Morrissey, Marr kind of vibe?
Yeah, Yeah.
You were just writing poetry. He was coming up with the music.
I would ever say I was a poet, but no, it wasn't that cut and dry. In fact, it was like Jagger and Richards, because sometimes I would write music as well.
Right.
As I know Mick, there's a lot of Rolling Stones concerts where people are going, "Why is Mick Jagger playing guitar?" You know what I mean?
Is it plugged in?
Got Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. It's like, Mick, we know you're not just the singer. It's fine. But mostly it was Matthew presenting me with music and me writing melodies and lyrics to it, yeah. And that was Jacques. And I wanted... Okay, so I'd seen the Smiths South Bank show where Johnny... I guess you've seen that, right?
Where Johnny says he went to the door and knocked on the door and said...
And he said he wanted the credits to be like Lieber and Stoller.
Yeah.
Right? So I knew that the credits would be, to make Matthew happy, I put his surname first, right? So it was Scott Reynolds. And so that was so that's what it was like. It was me and him in a room with no money. I remember we went busking once because I thought we were students. I think I was doing Russian and religion. And the summer holiday came round, and I thought, well, I'll just sign on. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I found out the day before that they'd stopped that the year before. If you were a student, you couldn't sign on.
Yeah, because my brother, but that was in the 70s. He could have signed on at Christmas, Easter, and the summer holidays, and actually, they just couldn't even be bothered. They were like, "Oh, I can't be bothered. I have to go to, to DIS and sort it out." And to be honest, they saved money on the dole in those years. You didn't go into debt.
No, but at this point, you couldn't sign on if you were a student.
Yeah.
In the 90s, they just stopped it. And they just brought it into... Anyway, and I found out like the day before. So I was like, what the hell are we going to do? And so we ended up busking. And I remember I said, so we'll do all tomorrow's parties, right? And I was singing the Japan version.
Right.
And Matthew who was a huge Velvet fan, was doing the Velvet's version. And it was all out of, it was all out of sync. I remember, so I was going, no, what cause you shall. And he said, he just stopped. We were in like Piccadilly Circus. And he just said, that's the last fucking time I bust with you. And we'd made like a couple of quid. And in those days, oh my God, I've sounded like Dickens here. In those days, in the tube stations, they had confectionery machines. So we were starving. I said, we've got to get something to eat now. So we put the money in, and we got a marathon bar out of the machine, and we were fighting over who had half each, and we dropped it on the tracks, you know.
Oh dear.
I think I remember watching like a rat eat, like, you know, what had been the net result of like 4 hours of busking with me doing Japan versions of Velvet Underground songs.
I have to say, anybody who was watching the U2 must have been very confused. And
well, we had our bass player who was a stoner on bongos as well. Yeah, Mark, you're just going to have to pause again because I do have a bladder problem.
Okay, wait a minute. Yeah. So that's all good. Yeah, so just picking up that. Yeah, so you had that experience. So when did Too Pure came knocking at your door at this stage?
Well, like I said, we did this gig at the Dublin Castle, and it was just amazing. And then there were some people who contacted. So I'd been sending tapes of the demos we had done at Wimbledon. I remember sending them to like weird labels, like Anxious Records. Do you remember the Dave Stewart label?
I remember there was. Did they have? I got Anxious. I do, because I think they had. Was it Polystyrene was on? Did she do an album on?
Curve. Do you remember Curve?
Curve, yeah, I remember Curve, and a member of the Mekons, I think, Mark Armand. I think he did a track on Anxious Records as well with a woman from the Mekons. I know this is very good.
I was aiming, like, you know, pretty low, and Satanta as well. Who I ended up doing 2 records with. Anyway, for some reason, Too Pure came through, and now this was very interesting, Mark, because I'd had enough faith to get to London, do demos, you know, leave a very comfortable setup in Cardiff. And as soon as the first record label approached us, I panicked. I was like, if I don't sign to these, this is my only opportunity. I'll never get this opportunity again.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was about. We didn't have a manager or anything. Yeah, it was odd. We should have just done a single deal with them. Because what happened, you know, I'd done so many gigs, you know, since I was like 16. And Matthew as well. And it was like, yeah, we just wanted to. This is interesting. I was looking back on this, actually, because a few people have been in touch about doing interviews because it's the 30th anniversary of the first Jacques album. And I didn't know that. And I remembered how desperate we were to make a record. Do you know what I mean? Like I've since made about 14 albums. But at the time, it was like, this is our only chance. This is all I ever want to do. So, you know, I have to take it in that context, which doesn't exist now. So we signed to Pure. I knew Too Pure were cool because they had PJ Harvey.
They had the Faith Healers as well, didn't they? Another brilliant
I wasn't
band.
aware of those. It was PJ Harvey and Stereolab.
Right, of course. Stereolab, very sophisticated pop.
So I liked both of those to a degree. But it was a big mistake, really, because we signed to them. And then I had subsequent meetings, and I would go into like big label offices. So I did. Me and Matthew signed to Warner's as songwriters.
Yeah.
So that was good. But I was so naive. We signed to Warner Chappell. Oh my God! I cringe when I think back. So I remember the guy caught us. We might have released a single at this point. I can't remember. And our first single was Single of the Week, the Melody Maker. This was huge for us then.
Was that Kid Stardust?
Yeah, it's not even a very good song. I never liked it. But that was a big deal. And I remember being in Warner Chappell's office, and I was like, so who else do you do? Anyone I might have heard of? And he was like, well, do you know anything of the Frank Sinatra catalogue? Madonna? Have you heard of Madonna? Kylie Minogue? You fucking idiot. You dumb hick. I was like, and I was a Sinatra fan. And I was like, oh, yeah, what do I think? But after that, I kept having meetings with like Chrysalis, Parlophone, and they said, yeah, well, the word on the vine is like, you're really hot. It's like, so how do you feel about like doing an album? And it's like, oh no, we've already signed a deal with Too Pure. And they're like, you're joking. And we're going to give you £500,000. And you signed for like 50 grand. So, we were very naive, very desperate, and very young.
Yes. But I guess you don't know if it's going to, that was the only offer on the table or whether there would be more. But hindsight and all that is quite tricky, isn't it, really? I mean...
But the thing is, we still made the album that I wanted to make. So we had demoed Pioneer Soundtrack to Camden, which Too Pure were paying for. I think it was Roundhouse Studios. Now, you've got to understand, someone's paying for us to go into a studio. That was unheard of. Previous to that, I'd be at rehearsals and I'd bring a cellist along or a flautist, and I'd be like, come on, everyone, at the end, it's like £7 each. And they'd be like, I'm not paying for a fucking cello player, man. The bass player would say, I want to be in the Ramones. I don't want, what's all this string shit? So, it was like a struggle. And then, like, we signed, and someone says, okay, you're in the studio for 10 days to demo the album. And it's like, this is very... And they said, oh, by the way, because Too Pure were an offshoot of Beggars Banquet.
Yeah.
And they had, oh my God, this was mind-blowing. They had an account with a taxi firm. Now, we really ripped that to bits, So I was like, oh, okay, so we've got to be at the demo studio like 11 a.m. And I was like, oh, no, you just phone this number and it's a free taxi. Like, you're joking. This was amazing. Amazing. And the guy who was recording our demos was a guy called Julian Standen. And I thought, I recognise that name. So I said this to him, and he'd produced one of my favourite Momus albums. You know who Momus is?
Yes, my God, I just interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. Yes. Yeah.
He produced The Poison Boyfriend. And I was like, I mean, I guess you can see how kind of, what's the word, parochial? I was impressed that someone was paying for your cab. Like, Momus to me was a great songwriter.
Well, after fighting over a Mars bar and losing to a rat, I suppose this did seem like a bit of another world, didn't it, really?
Yeah, that's a good point. So anyway, we demoed the Pioneer soundtrack, the first Jacques album, with Julian, and it sounded good. And then, of course, my confidence started building. And so Too Pure... Okay, so I had a few friends who worked for the music press. There was one guy who worked for Melody Maker called Jonathan Seltzer. And Scott Walker had just released an album called Tilt. You know that record?
Oh, yes, I remember Tilt.
Now, my friend Jonathan said, "Oh, I've got a promo cassette of an album I think you're going to love." So I walked down. This was a wonderful thing then about London. It's like I moved by then to Archway. Everyone lived in a 2-mile radius. It was great. It was like the Monkeys or something. It was like a village. So I walked down to John's. He gave me a promo for Tilt, and I listened to that album, and it blew me away. The sonics of it more than anything. The way it went from microscopic or macroscopic to widescreen.
Mm.
If you listen to the opening song, it's like someone breaking out of a shell. There it goes, huge, panoramic, and I was blown away by this. Okay, so, and I grew up with Scott Walker because of my mum, but I loved this Tilt album. So, did the demos, went back to Too Pure, and they said, "Oh, we've got a fax from the Momus producer guy. You want to see us?" Sure. And the fax said, "What a great band. I'd love to produce their album." And so the head of Too Pure, Paul Cox, says, "What do you think? The demos are really good." And I don't know why, I just said, "Fuck that." And I had the promo cassette Tilt. I said, "The guy who did this is the guy I want." Now, Peter Walsh, who was Scott Walker's producer for the latter part of his career, Peter Walsh had produced Simple Minds and lots of other. I had no idea, but he was a top-tier producer. And my reasoning was, okay, so when you're demoing, you're always told no. I'd say, I want this to sound like, in the first half of the bar of this part, I want it to sound like it's in a mission building from 1932.
Mm-hmm.
Distant and watery. And then as soon as we hit this bar, I want it to be right in your face like a Kodak, like a Polaroid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have any idea what I was talking about. In fact, thinking back, I'm not sure what I meant. But when I heard Tilt, I knew that the guy who recorded that would have no problem. Anything I could throw at him, People were always going, "You can't do that, mate." No, anyway. So I said to Pure, I want Peter Walsh, that's his name, is it? To do this. And interestingly, they were actually impressed by my ambition.
Mm.
So Peter Walsh's fee was probably more than the album budget. But I met with Pete and his manager, Gary, was Frank Sinatra's agent.
Wow, you have moved up a notch here, haven't you?
Thank you. Exactly. So I'm meeting these guys off Baker Street, and it's in a new league. And one of the first albums I'd got when I'd moved to London was the Reprise years, Frank Sinatra's Complete. And I was like deep into his phrasing, his singing, the way he sings, phrasing, the way he comes late on a beat. And all of a sudden, it's like I'm talking to his UK agent, and he's telling me stories about Frank. The last time he was playing like the Albert Hall. And it was just, and I was like 23, 22.
You were going to get used to that lifestyle, weren't you?
I did, and then it left. It only lasted a few years, but it was great. So I was talking to Pete. I was, Tilt's quite a far out album, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's quite extreme. So I was saying to Pete, I want the album, the piano to sound purple, and all this. And he didn't go, "Can I do that, mate?" He was like, "Yeah, we'll make that work."
So did he do the first album then?
He did it. He did it for points because we couldn't afford his fee. He said, "I think these are great songs. I really like you. And I'll do it for points, And
fantastic. So what studio did you go to?
Oh, this is endlessly interesting. So I remembered my mum liked Yazoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, and I liked to play her singles. And they had their first album, if you remember, was called Upstairs at Eric's.
Mm-hmm.
Eric was the name of the guy that owned a studio called Blackwing, which was next to the Thames, near the Shakespeare place, the theatre.
Yeah.
And that's where we recorded it.
God.
So it's like, oh, this is Eric. He owns the studio. Oh, right. So the Upstairs at Eric's, Yazoo, don't go situation. It was wonderful to join all these dots.
Yes.
And Pete was so committed. He basically slept at the studio. You would just shower and then carry on working. And I was like so young and green. And I remember him telling me once, I said, "I'm not sure about that vocal, Pete." He said, "Anthony, you're a great singer." Right? This is the guy whose last album had been Scott Walker. Now, I wasn't a great singer, right? But for someone to say that to you on your first album, do you know what I mean?
Oh, it's fantastic. You just have to keep your feet on the ground. So, did he get all what you wanted in the sound?
He did.
It
was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. And it helped in a way, knowing that this was out of their remit. You mentioned the Faith Healers and like Moonshake, I think. We were in the big leagues. We were working with top tier guys. Yeah. Ultimately it didn't pan out like that. But as an experience for your first record, it was really, and Pete wasn't just complimentary to me. He was a pro And he was a lovely man, but he was a brilliant engineer as well.
Yeah. And when that album came out, did you tour it? Did you sort of get in the transit van and go around the venues of?
Well, this is the weird thing. So this album came out in the summer of '96, and I'd been a big Music Press fan, right? So the first review that appeared for Pioneer Soundtrack was Album of the Week in The Guardian. So this was a full page by Ian Penman.
Oh God, the famous Ian,
right? Who've done some of my favorite Japan interviews. Now, my parents didn't buy The Guardian, they bought the Daily Mirror. But our interesting communist neighbours bought The Guardian. And it's like there's a full page by Ian Penman. Okay, then the next review was it was Album of the Week in Melody Maker by Alan Jones.
Oh yes, Mr. Editor, Uncut.
Who met them all, like Lou Reed, and then it got across the board incredible reviews, and with proper writers, legendary writers, good writers.
Mm.
So and then all of a sudden, it's like, right, you've got to play Paris on Monday. Then you're playing Barcelona, then Madrid, then Cologne. So it was just, amazing.
God, yes. Your audience, were they generally a sophisticated hipster bunch?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, they did. This was pre-email, so I did get a lot of letters, and yeah, there were people who were interested in literature, and when I went to Paris, first time we played Paris, it was just like a dream. I mean, I'd been to Paris before, and it was almost like the more pretentious I was, the more they loved you.
Excellent.
So you did this concert at this huge radio show in Paris, and there was nothing you could say. So my point being, I don't think I was ever pretentious, really. But we'd come from Cardiff, and, where everyone's going, you got ideas about your station. Why do you want to use strings? No, you want to do some covers. And then I'm in Paris, and it's just like, I love Jacques Brel, I love Charles Aznavour. And after the show, you've just got beautiful Parisian women, or girls then, I guess, saying, come back, to my penthouse suite and I'll play you. I remember I had a thing with a girl who's a French girl, and her father was the doctor for Jean Cocteau.
Wow.
And it was as far away as you could get.
Yes, well, God, you really are sort of in every industry. You are just on another league here, aren't you? You're not just talking to some doctor dealing with some donuts.
But unfortunately, the sales did not reflect this.
Oh, God.
And that's what it comes down to. So it was great and it was wonderful. But getting Pete Walsh in, and like the album was the most expensive album Too Pure had ever done. And it sold moderately, and it sold moderately, all over Europe. I mean, it was released in America on Rick Rubin's label.
Oh,
America.
yes.
But
So
then I
then,
remember. Yeah, sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say, did you ever tour America at this stage?
No, I have played New York, but solo, no. Because Jack was like an eight-piece group.
Yes.
And with crew and everything. No, we didn't. And it was interesting because we were playing Barcelona. And I decided not to go out. Oh, this was when I met Marky Smith.
Right, Marky Smith.
Now, this was interesting. Okay. But just going back to the Rick Rubin thing, American recording, I decided to have a quiet night. And then the rest of Jack came in to the hotel. I might have had a suite. I'm not sure. And they were completely leathered, And they were with Lamb Chop.
Yes.
But they'd been on this huge drinking jag with Lamb Chop. And we had a gig the next day, and I was with my the crew, Doug. I was completely sober. And Jack came in, they were like sailors on shore leave. They were so drunk. And they immediately started fighting, offering me out. But I talked to one of the guys at Lamb Chop, and he said, "Oh, you're an American with us." I think they did, but he said, "Rick Rubin told me he hates Jack." Not interesting.
Yeah. Well, that was a little bit too honest.
No, it's fine. But anyway, so the next day, we were playing this this show in this 13th century square, right? At 3 a.m. we went on. And they were like bullet holes in the wall from the Civil War.
Yeah.
So atmospheric. Did the sound check. And then one of our roadies said, "Oh, I've smuggled some ecstasy in the amps. Would you like one, Anthony?" I said, "What are we on?" He said, "Well, you're not on for about another 2 hours." I said, yeah, why not? So I popped an E, walked around it for a bit. Then I got in the lift at the hotel. It was like a 13th floor I had to get up to. Who was in the lift with me? Marky Smith. So the keyboard player in Jack was called George, and he was a Fall fanatic. And I just started to come up on ecstasy in the lift. And I remember for 13 floors babbling at Marky Smith. "Oh, my mate loves you." I said, and during the course of this journey, he didn't say a word. And then we got to the 13th floor. The door opened, and just before he stepped out, he went, "Are you fucking Welsh or something?" Which was the perfect thing for Marky Smith.
Yes. Absolutely. Dear old Mark. Yes, he must have loved that moment. Yeah. So, and did the gig go okay that day?
That morning, yeah, it was fine.
Yes.
Oh, well, the night before, George had beaten up Matthew. So Matthew had concussion.
Right. Why? Just because that was the thing they did.
Bands, they were drunk. So Matthew had to do the gig in a wheelchair. And the whole fee we got for the gig went to the doctor. Because George battered Matthew.
My God. Did they sort out their problems?
Yeah. I guess. I don't know.
God,
But that was Jack. it's like we weren't professional.
So then when you came to do the second album, the follow-up, what was that like? Because obviously there must have been a bit of a chat about your budget and what was going to be the next direction the band were going on.
Well, the first thing we did, Pioneer Soundtracks was so beautifully received critically. I mean, I guess it's sold moderately. I mean, I do get money from it.
Right, nice.
Not much, but every year I get a couple of shekels. And so we tried to leave Too Pure. And we had offers from Chrysalis again, I remember. So we had to take a year out where we were trying to do that, but it was too tricky. So we lost a year. And then what happened was we did an album. We renegotiated. Beggars Banquet basically took over.
Right.
They said you're too good for Too Pure, so we're going to give you 10 times the amount of money.
Brilliant. How very decent. And then you had was it Darren Allison, your producer for this album?
Yeah, well, Pete Walsh was going to do it, and I think Brian Eno showed some interest as well, amazingly, after the first album. But I was so young and naive. I remember I turned down so much TV. I turned down The White Room. Do you remember that?
Oh yes, and there what about The Word? Did you do The Word?
Oh no, I would have done that. I think that had ended by then. I liked Terry Christian.
Yeah.
Top of the Pops, we nearly got on because they had a new thing where they were going to do hot bands. It was between us and Biss.
Right.
And they chose Biss. And I remember Chris Evans loved a single off the Jazz Age called Steamin'. But it was whether that charted bigger than a group called Space.
Oh yes, the female of the species.
So there was all these things, and I made us turn down The White Room. And I can't remember what your question was. Sorry.
Yes, following up the sort of massive Pioneer Soundtracks budget to the follow-up album after, obviously record sales weren't great and budgets must have been examined. But you said Beggars were taking over that side of it. And I just wondered what the songwriting process was at this point, realizing that, you're coming back with the follow-up album, which can sometimes be a bit tricky.
We had double the budget, at least. What you've got to realize about record sales is that I think the artist only makes 13% of sales after costs have been recouped.
Yes.
Now, at the same time, I was waiting for my publishing advance. So me and my girlfriend were waiting on a flat, and we actually moved into Too Pure's offices. And I remember wandering around looking at faxes. And there was a fax from Taiwan offering 10 grand for the licensing of Pioneer Soundtracks.
Right.
And when you consider that album being licensed in 30 countries, so what's 30 times 10 grand?
Is it 300,000?
Yeah. So I remember saying to my manager, where does all this money go for licensing? Because the album's been released, in every country in Europe and America. And if Taiwan, an obscure territory, are offering 10 grand, then what was France offering? And he said, "Oh, you don't get that money. That's how they make their money." So when the Jazz Age had double the budget, it wasn't like the record label was making a loss.
Yeah.
They made lots of money. And remember, this was pre-streaming. So, you know, the sales were CD and to a lesser extent vinyl. You know, people had to, you couldn't even copy CDs, you know, you could, you know.
Yes. And were you and Matthew still a good unit at this stage?
No, we weren't, no. You're going to have to pause again, I'm afraid, David. Hang on.
Okay. Oh, yes. So at this stage, were you and Matthew then, had you gone your separate ways?
No, we hadn't. But what happened was Matthew and I were making good money from our publishing.
Yeah.
Now, are you a fan of the Young Ones?
Oh, yes. Well, yes, at the time. I mean, it's not so funny now, but at the time I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. Do you remember the episode where the truck comes through the house and it's full of money? Remember that episode?
No, I don't actually. Gosh, okay.
I think it's when Viv is pregnant. But anyway, at the end, the truck comes through money, and then all of a sudden they're rich. Do you remember that? And Rick Mail's got a fur coat and a cane. Remember that?
God, I'm going to have to confess, I don't quite remember the fur coat. I remember bits of it, but yes.
Anyway, so that was what it was like. But when me and Matthew walked into rehearsal, because our name was in the songwriting brackets, we got good money.
Yeah.
So I would walk in with a fake fur coat and a cane, and the rest of the guys were struggling, you know. But what having money did to, I mean, we didn't have like loads of money. But we'd had more money than we'd ever had. And that kind of makes you, or it made him more picky.
Right.
So he had a lot of other things he could be doing rather than being in a room with me playing guitar. You know, this is not unique to us. This happens to like loads of groups. So I don't know. I mean, he could be playing roulette in Soho, you know, with Francis Bacon. Was he alive then still?
Yes, I think Francis was still alive. Jeffrey Bernard.
He really didn't need to be in a bedroom with me. So we started writing, then he would just give me a tape. And I would write to that. And it was still some great stuff, you know. But Matthew was a very interesting guy. He didn't really want to do anything.
Blimey. Even on the second album. The Love Had Gone had it at that stage.
He I remember a little bit later when we were, you know, because the shine of touring goes off really quickly.
Mm.
And when we were touring, we would always pick him up last, but like 8 a.m, and he wouldn't get out of bed. He would only have got into bed like an hour before. And he just didn't want to go, you know.
Right. Tricky. But there's some great songs on that album. 3 o'clock in the morning is a genius piece of work.
Yeah, well, I wrote that. He wrote The Middle Age.
He wrote what?
he wrote the middle eight.
Right, but there's some.
Oh, but I mean, the Lita L, Nico shows. No, when Matthew would give me a cassette with his, like, I remember when he gave me the cassette, the instrumental to Lolita L. I was like I was in church. I couldn't believe. Like, what chords are these? These must be some magical, mystical chords. But they weren't. They were just B minor, A, G. But the way he played them was, special.
Yes. So your experience and memory wasn't quite so fond as your first album?
Oh, no. No, it wasn't. It felt more like a job then.
Right. But you sort of plodded on to do a third album and another record label at this stage.
I wouldn't say plodded.
Skipped. Did you skip on?
Well, I did another, I think, 3 albums with Satanta under the name of Jacques.
Yes.
So, they were, very involved.
But
yeah.
I was just going to say the third album, which is the one titled God, now I missed it, haven't I?
The way it's always been.
Yes, with on another label. So were you with Matthew still at that point?
Well, as I said earlier, Jack would only be me and Matthew.
Right, so that was definitely...
That's why I can't do a 30th anniversary show.
No.
Pioneer Soundtracks, because Matthew wouldn't do it. And I'm too... I've got too many morals to do it without him,
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. Did you part ways then after the third album?
We did, yeah. I mean, he texted me last week because he gets his haircut once a year.
Right.
Because he's bald. So he has some kind of trim. He works for the tax office now or something.
Right. And does he say fond memories or?
Yeah. But I met him for the first time a few years ago, and the first thing he said to me was, "Do you want to buy my guitars?"
And you thought, I didn't expect you to say that.
But he was such a brilliant, musician. I mean, I'm not a musician. And I'm like, how can someone who's that talented not be interested in music?
Yes. That is weird, isn't it, really? So you'd already started making these other albums as Jacques?
Yeah, but you know what? I think for the purpose of this interview, we should just stick with Jacques.
Jacques, yes. No. Well, it was kind of interesting. I mean, because it's like you've got this little crossover, haven't you, of sort of musical moments, which is quite. It must have been a very prolific time for you, bringing out music. But did you feel like it was an optimistic time? Because I remember there was talking of My Life Story. I remember seeing them live. I think it was in Cambridge, and they had the Murray Lackland Young, the $1 million poet, appears. So did you feel that there was a lot of optimism and money floating around at that stage?
Yeah, I did. And, excuse me. I had an endoscopy last Saturday.
Oh, yes, that's quite painful.
No, they down the throat. It's Tupples. So where I live now, excuse me.
No, that's fine.
I am, like, I won't say dying. Well, we're all dying in a way. But Tupples, come here. So I moved into this place. It's like eight cats have moved in with me.
Oh, God, I'm a cat person, you see.
Oh, let me grab Tubbles. Hang on. Tubbles, come here.
So 8, that's quite a lot of cats you've got, by the way. I mean,
Oh, you know what, David? They all need love.
I know they do need, but on their terms.
Well, that's fine. They're the kind of terms I like.
Oh, good.
But I really get the feeling a lot of these cats have been through bad times.
Right.
So when I moved in here, a cat called Di was really skinny, came in. Now Tubbles, who's like a beast, so gorgeous. But another cat moved in the last couple of weeks, who I've called Norma. And for the first week, if I went like this with my hair, she would cringe.
Oh.
If I raised my hand to get something off a shelf or whatever, she would like panic.
Right.
And, that breaks my heart.
I know, that's a horrible thought, isn't it?
So now she doesn't do that. So I'm giving her cuddles all the time. Feed, I spend more money on food for them than myself. And now she just sleeps next to my head.
Well, she's probably, reading your thought patterns. It's beautiful. I think that's a lovely thought, actually. I do love the cat. Yeah, so wait a minute. So what were we up to? Oh, yes, I was just saying, the optimism at that time. We were sort of going from John Major to New Labour, Team Tony. It must, you had 2 musical projects going on. It must have felt like a very prolific moment.
Yeah, it was. But I was young. So I think it would feel great whatever year it was.
Yeah.
Because it didn't hurt. It didn't take me, 45 minutes to leave the house.
No, well, as we get older, we do make a lot more sounds just sitting down and getting up than we used to, put it that way.
Well, I read this great Lou Reed quote, right, the other day. And it kind of mirrors how I feel. He said, I don't know what's going on, right? So this was one of his last interviews, yeah? He said, I don't know what's going on. Last year I was 19, right? And when I fell down, I just got back up. He said, now if I fall down, I have to go through 9 months of physical therapy.
Yes.
But you look in pretty good shape, Dave.
Well, I think it was mainly because when I was young, from the age of 4, I was very asthmatic, so I had to sort of put a lot of effort into keeping alive, and I couldn't really abuse the body, which was already struggling as it was. So I'm still asthmatic, but and there's been a few health moments. I did get diagnosed with cancer in 2016, kind of by accident. I went for one reason, and then they were looking a bit for something, and they said, "Oh, we'll give you a scan." And then suddenly I got called in to say, "You need to have an operation, have some of your kidney removed," which was a bit of a shock. But they said, "Oh," but it was a weird conversation because it was one of those ones where he said, "Oh, you're very lucky," and I was thinking, "Now, you go in, to the consultant's room."
Yeah.
And it's always a bit worrying because there's other people in the space, behind you, and you wonder why they're there as well. And they've got this sort of the scans on their screen, haven't they? And they start pointing things out, and you think, "Oh, that's not a good sign, is it?" And you get told you've got cancer, and you think, "I'm not computing at the moment." And then said, "Oh, you're very lucky." And it's like, "I'm not sure," because we caught it early. So in a way it was, but I've had to have scans every year ever since, but that's just my medical journey in life. I think we're all on a medical journey, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I've got an appointment with the chronic pain clinic.
Right.
And I've got an operation scheduled. I had an endoscopy. Anyway, But it's like that Lou Reed thing. It's like last week I was like, recording plenty of soundtracks. And now I'm a wreck.
Yes, I know. It's I know.
And it also when you got this cancer thing, okay, so you said you had like really bad asthma.
Yes.
So how did that change your relationship to your body, with your body?
Because I had it all year, but in six weeks in the summer, it just wasn't controlled. So I would just be struggling for those 6 to 8 weeks of kind of really struggling, to get through that period. And so when I got, to September, I think, oh, thank God for that. I can breathe again properly. I don't have to keep taking puff, So I didn't have I didn't have that ability, or I didn't have the opportunity to wreck my body when I'm, during my life, I couldn't start smoking. I couldn't take, too many drugs or anything like that because the body was already I felt penalized. So what's that?
In the balance, it was already.
Yes, I wasn't blessed with this, like you can do anything you want to my body and it'll be fine. It was a bit like, if you do that, mate, we're going to be in more chronic problems. So it was, in a way, drinking was our thing when I was growing up and in my adult life. But anything beyond that, it was almost like, God, I'm already struggling as it is. It's like penalizing yourself, isn't it? Already giving yourself a points deduction before the season started.
I'll tell you why it's interesting. Like, I had hay fever when I was young. I still do. And summers were horrible for me.
Yes.
Summer was like going to hell. I couldn't be involved with summer.
Yeah.
It was hell for me. But when you're talking about health and abuse, I started smoking in my 40s. And I've been getting ill a lot recently. And my friend said to me a few weeks ago, she said, "Oh, this is amazing. You haven't smoked once." I always wanted to smoke, but I didn't like it. And then something happened. What happened was my girlfriend ran off with Leonard Cohen while I was writing a book about Leonard Cohen in my 40s. That's another story.
So that was a lot to take in, that moment, actually.
Yeah, that's another story. So I wrote a book on Leonard Cohen. While I was writing it, the girl I was ran off. Anyway, and I started smoking it. Anyway, my friend said, and I said, no, because I don't feel well. And smoking, I said, when I smoke, it's an expression of health. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
that's smoke. It means I feel strong.
Yes.
So I totally understand what you mean when you say you feel fragile. So you don't want to, impinge on that.
Yeah, but probably a bit like your summers. You would sort of. Well, my summers, was just struggling, going to the doctors, getting more drugs, slightly getting better, then struggling, getting more drugs, having steroids. And, by the end of that, you just thought, God, I just want to, I just want to be able to breathe. I just want to be able to go up the stairs without stopping halfway and having to puff a Ventolin to get to the rest of the journey. That was through that period. And, so I couldn't take it for granted. That's what I'm trying to say. Most people see what I've found. Let's go off the top. So what I found is that people who would just look at me and say, "Oh God, Dave is always on about his asthma. It's his thing that he talks about in the summer." But then it's been interesting because those people my age are all having health problems. So suddenly they come to me and say, "Oh God, I've got gout, or I've got this, or I've got to take this, I've got to change my diet." And I almost kind of find myself thinking, actually, I'm almost bored. It's like, oh, you've caught up. You now know what it's like to have a thing. Whereas actually for most of their life, they got there happily going through it, taking health for granted, got to that point where suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, you kind of get a kind of tap on the shoulder and go, oh, actually, we got some problems with you. Your heart's not quite so good. You got this problem, you got that problem. Welcome to old age. Whereas I've been like, well, from the age of 4, I've been struggling. So I suppose that's the thing.
Well, I remember. It was summer holidays, and I remember I was out with my friend Ian, and we were running through allotments, right? In the beautiful summer's day. Sun was shining, the cotton was high, and I'd forgotten to take in my antihistamines because I was a kid, I wasn't good at that. And we were like larking around. And all of a sudden, I started sneezing, and then my eyes swelled up.
Yeah.
And I remember this vividly. And I couldn't see. And my throat swelled up, and I couldn't breathe.
Well, did you get that itchy throat?
I got itchy throat. It was like if one of my hairs on my head touched my skin, it was like an electric shock. Anyway, my point is this. My friend was like larking around, and I was, and then because I'd forgotten to take my meds, I was in hell. I really was in hell. A bit, maybe not as bad as what you had. And my grandmother lived close, and I remember staggering, and she had to put like ice on my face. And I remember thinking, the world is not a nice place to live in.
Yes, no, it's tough.
The world doesn't like me.
No, I remember being very at a young age, sort of like, well, what have I done to God? I sort of, and no one being able to explain why God would give me asthma when it was like I was only young. So that kind of we parted ways quite early, really, didn't we? So
I did too, and I'll tell you why. This seems a bit flippant now. Do you remember BBC microcomputers?
Yes, there was Sinclair, Microsoft, BBC computers.
Commodore.
Yes, that one.
My friend had a micro, and he had Space Invaders, and it was a beautiful summer's day, and I'd taken my meds, so I was okay. And we knocked on his door and said, "Can we play Space Invaders on your BBC Micro?" And he said, kids can be twats, right? So he said, he said, "If it rains, you can come in and play," right? And it was a beautiful July day. He said, "If it rains, you can come in," you prick. So we were all Catholics. So I said, "Let's get to the church and pray that it rains." Yeah, come on, guys. Oh, not guys. We didn't say guys.
Yeah.
Come on, chums. And we ran to St. Albans Church, and we got in the pew. I said, "Right, 1, 2, 3, everyone pray for rain." And as I was praying, I thought, what about the people who have got washing out? You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like, they wanted to rain. What about the people who were on a picnic? Well, it's like, how can God possibly listen to me because I want to play Space Invaders? And I lost my faith that day.
That day, yes, my God, you'll have to go back to the church and bring peace to that moment, really. That was quite something.
But it's like I realised it's so subjective. What I wanted had nothing to do with, most... Like, so praying was just like bollocks.
Yes.
We never did.
No.
Never did play Space Invaders.
And it never rained again. No, it's a tragic one. So just going back to your Jack years then.
Yeah.
So we get into the millennium, and obviously you get to third album on another label. Do you have a moment where, to quote Jim Morrison, you think this is the end?
Yeah. In fact, I knew it was the end because there's a song on that third album called No North Left, which is about the end of me and Matthew. Because when you have a songwriting partnership, it's very intimate.
Well, yes.
It's intimate in a way that you aren't intimate with other people. So, me and Matthew didn't particularly get on. Matthew didn't really get on with many people. I think a lot of songwriters partnerships get on because they make money.
Yeah.
So if Mick Jagger and Keith Richards hadn't made lots of money, they probably wouldn't have continued.
No.
I think now Johnny Marr and Morrissey wouldn't get on. They wouldn't sit in a bedroom and write, would they?
No. It would be a pointless exercise and very disappointing as well, I think.
But also they're loaded and they got other places to be.
Yeah.
Now, I had a really interesting experience with Johnny Marr.
Yeah.
Because as I was telling you, when I was a kid, I didn't like school, so I would traunt, right? I would bitch off school, but I wouldn't play dice in a back alley. I would go to the library and I would educate myself. I would read stuff I was interested in, and I would have my Walkman on, and I would be listening to the Smiths and Japan and who else? Whoever. And I would be reading, feminine literature, books on magic, stuff. And that's how I would spend my day rather than go to school. Now, this library was an amazing Victorian library in Cardiff Centre. And it's not a library anymore, but it was beautiful. And it was one of those old-fashioned, well, it was Victorian building, but you would go into the reading room and there would be tramps in there. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
You remember?
The good old days, yes.
But, it was shh. So you were forced to be quiet in public with other people, which I think is an amazing thing about libraries that's been lost because of council cuts and whatever. But I would go to this library and I'd be listening to Hatful of Hollow, Queen is Dead, reading stuff I was interested in, books on magic, spare rib, melody maker, sounds. And decades later, I was stood outside that library about 10 years ago. And there's a bookshop opposite that old library now called Waterstones. And Johnny Marr was stood outside. And I had interviewed him via email for my second Japan book because he was a Japan fan, right?
Right.
So I was meeting some friends in Waterstones in a cafe. But this cafe is opposite this library. And I saw Johnny Marr. And I read somewhere, if you want to approach someone who's famous, say their name very quietly. So if it's John Lennon or whatever, well, it wouldn't be John Lennon, like Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
You don't go, oh my God, Paul. You would go, hi, Paul. Paul? So I said, Johnny? And he went, yeah. I said, oh, Anthony Reynolds, I interviewed you for my Cries and Whispers. Oh, yeah. And he was lovely, lovely, lovely guy. And I said, have you got 2 minutes? Because he had a gig in Cardiff that night. And he said, yeah, sure. And I showed him the library. I said, this is where I would go. listening to your music when I was mitching off school. I would
Nice.
walk up those steps and in the reading room, and I said I preferred, it doesn't take long for me to get nerdy. So I said I preferred the version of Back to the Old House. I preferred the Hatful of Hollow BBC session version of the album, Anyway, I said, and it was a huge thing, and I would walk up these steps at 9 o'clock, and I would check out at 3:30. And he said, I used to do exactly the same thing. He said, I used to mitch off school and go to libraries. It was such a beautiful moment.
God, that is a lovely time. That is a lovely time, isn't it?
But there's a funny little punchline to this. So we talked. He said, "Oh yeah, your book was great, and what are you doing next?" He was a very giving. He was more interested in me.
Yeah.
Really. Anyway, he said, "Well, it's been great meeting you." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Honestly, it's been amazing." And to show you this, I said, "Can you put me on the guest list for your show tonight?" He said, "Yeah, for sure." Oh, thank you so much, Johnny. And he walked up, and he stopped. And he went, "Yeah, sorry, what was your name again?"
Excellent.
So, David, do you think you've got enough now?
Yeah, my God, I have got a lot actually. That's been incredible, and yes, I've been mesmerised. But I do. So on the album front, on the Jacques front, so the one that you recommend is the debut album, Pioneer Soundtracks.
There was a Redux version re-released, a 10-year anniversary. That's the most definitive one. But that was released like 20 years ago now,
Ah, that's amazing. So you got, just on your next project then, you've got this book coming out or to be written?
I am writing it, but I've been unwell. It's called Soused, A History of Intoxication. So it's basically an account of when man first started getting, loaded.
Yeah.
So you can see why it's taken me a long time.
Well, quite. And are you very prolific then? I mean, you've written a lot of books, and the 2 Japan books are colossal bits of work. Are you able to work very fast?
I could, and I was always motivated by being poor. That was a huge motivational thing. But I've just become unwell in the last couple of years. So it's like I said, I've got an appointment. But I mean, don't put this in the interview, but
oh yeah, God, wait a minute, I'll hit pause. Wait a minute. And that was me in conversation with Anthony Reynolds, talk about his life in music and also writing. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.